Hi, and welcome to the Columbia Frontiers of Science student podcast series. We will explore how scientific ideas play out in everyday life. Each episode will tackle real-world case studies, questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, and connecting what we learn in class to the world beyond campus. From investigating myths around vaccines, to unpacking the psychology behind astrology, to examining why certain diet trends gain traction, each conversation invites us to look at familiar topics through a scientific lens. Let's dive in.
You've probably heard the claim before: vaccines cause autism. For some, it's a wry joke. For others, it's a deeply held belief caused by fear and misinformation. The truth behind that claim, and the damage that the claim has caused, is what we want to examine today. Let's first start with some definitions. What do vaccines do, and what does autism actually mean?
A vaccine trains the immune system. They present a safe version of a pathogen or a virus. And so the body can learn to respond and recognize this disease without actually feeling any severe symptoms.
Autism is a developmental condition affecting communication, behavior, and how someone experiences the world. The way doctors have diagnosed autism has changed since the 1990s. In 1998, we saw a big change. The vaccine autism myth began with a 1998 paper published.
Before explaining how this myth emerged, it's important to give some context regarding the research that was executed pertaining to vaccines and autism. So before the 1998 Lancet article that Wakefield wrote, some doctors were noticing a pattern. Like there'd be a frequent correlation between gastrointestinal problems appearing in children who also had autism. They didn't understand the relation between these two things. They wanted to see if the gastrointestinal problems were causing the autism, if the autism was causing gastrointestinal problems. But really, they just wanted to see what the link was, or if there was a third factor existing that connected these two. So in this Lancet article, the authors investigated whether children with developmental regression and autism-like symptoms also showed signs of intestinal inflammation, and if these could be linked to the MMR vaccine. They hypothesized that there are potentially links. The way that their study worked is they basically examined 12 children with a history of normal development, followed by developmental regression and abdominal issues. They looked through medical histories, colonoscopies, biopsies, lab tests, and neurological assessments to identify patterns between gut inflammation and the developmental disorders. What they found was that intestinal inflammation existed in all 12 children, and noted that most cases began soon after MMR vaccination. However, the study included only 12 children, so this small sample size has me and my team doubting the legitimacy of this study. Also, further studies emerged after disproving the vaccine autism link. And this Lancet article was even redacted. So the question remains, what made it so convincing?
But despite the scientific dubiousness of the claims made in the Lancet article, millions of people still picked up and ran with the idea. We can look towards fear and confirmation bias working together to create these effects. When things threaten the health of children, people's anxiety causes them to look for simple answers to often complex issues, creating spaces where confirmation bias can continue to perpetuate systems and ideas that might not be scientifically accurate. And we now know today that these ideas are in fact largely scientifically unfounded due to a myriad of later studies that have proven the exact opposite. Let's take a bit to look at those studies.
After the scare, researchers around the world got to work. Large-scale studies involving hundreds of thousands of children in countries from Denmark to the United States all produced the same result. There is no link between vaccines and autism. A 2015 study in JAMA looked at over 95,000 children. In a 2013 study, nearly half a million Danish children reached the same conclusion. The scientific consensus is global and overwhelming.
In the 2015 study by Jane et al., the researchers administered an MMR vaccine to infants with an older sibling with diagnosed autism. They returned to check up on the patients at 5 years of age to see if they received an autism diagnosis. They found no correlation. In the 2002 Denmark study by Madsen et al., the researchers examined the entire population data of Denmark, which is an absolutely massive sample size, and with even further confidence, we're able to confirm there's no correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism?
Vaccines save lives. Autism is not caused by them, and the myth is based on one fraudulent study, amplified by fear, misinformation, and media shortcuts. Good science disproved it. Now it's on us to communicate that science clearly. Subscribe to PubMed, a reputable medical source. Talk to your doctor, and lastly, get vaccinated and stay safe.
Have you ever read about your zodiac sign or horoscope and thought it was spot on?
Astrology's been a part of our lives for a while. Ancient civilizations looked to the stars and predict earthly events. But now, having so much more information than 4,000 years ago, why do we still care about whether we're a Scorpio or a Taurus?
Hi, I'm Michelle.
Hi, I'm Moksh.
I'm Ernest.
And I'm Ella.
Now, just to clarify, we're exploring the psychology behind astrology, not arguing for it to be fact or false. We all have our own beliefs, and we want to explore why.
We're going to be evaluating the claim that belief in astrology is rooted in cognitive biases, such as the Barnum effect and confirmation bias, and pre-existing personality traits.
Which leads us to our first major question. Does belief in astrology change how we see ourselves?
In my article, Do Astrological Beliefs Reflect Systematic Bias in Personality Measurement, researchers asked 500 individuals to complete a personality test that measured certain traits. The study found that people identified with the characteristics associated with their signs, which affected how they reported their own personality in the study. For example, Sagittariuses, who knew that their sign was associated with agreeableness, described themselves as such in surveys.
I feel like that's kind of true. I'm a Cancer, and I really internalize some of those traits, being super emotional and sometimes having a tough exterior. But also, aren't these descriptions applicable to literally everyone?
I'm glad you brought that up because one time I was with my friend who's a Gemini and I read a list of traits that she said she identified with, but I was actually reading the traits for Scorpios. So I feel like these descriptions are super broad and vague, so anyone can really identify with them and interpret them as they need.
So this study explained how horoscopes can affect the way we see ourselves. Do horoscopes also change the way we see things around us?
Yes. According to a study titled Good Day for Leos, horoscopes influence on perception, cognitive performances, and creativity. If your horoscope says you're going to have a good day, you'll subconsciously interpret the events that happen around you more positively. Think of it as sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it doesn't just affect positive thinking. Experiments performed in college students showed fake positive horoscopes could somehow boost creativity and IQ test scores, and that fake negative horoscopes could do the opposite. Notably, participants were only affected by their own horoscope reading. If they saw positive or negative horoscopes for other signs, it didn't really make a difference to the participant.
So if people can change how they perceive both themselves and events in general based on astrology, what types of people do you guys think are actually more likely to believe in astrology as a guiding philosophy in the first place?
I don't know. I feel like I read my horoscope in times of instability, so maybe like someone who's looking for validation.
Spot on. A paper titled Personality, Intelligence, and Belief in Astrology examined 264 people through personality tests and astrology belief surveys to study whether or not traits had a correlation when it comes to accepting horoscopes. They found that people who scored higher on narcissistic personality tests were more likely to believe in astrology. But why do you guys think that is?
Maybe people with more narcissistic tendencies are more likely to believe in grand, self-serving statements that zodiac signs and horoscopes tend to claim.
That's exactly the conclusion that the researchers in the study alluded to. Astrology appeals to these people because it can seemingly give individualized, flattering descriptions of a person, and those with more narcissistic traits are more likely to believe those self-flattering descriptions.
This belief in astrology isn't just based on personalities, though. Isn't there an effect called the Barnum effect, which states that astrology can confirm what you already think, based on how horoscopes are written?
Yeah, my study talked exactly about that phenomenon. It was a paper titled Popular Horoscopes and Barnum Effect. They tested 366 college students and used personality indexes to classify students' personalities and found that female subjects and neurotic individuals were statistically more likely to read and believe in horoscopes. They also tested how participants rated the accuracy of the description of their own signs. So even if those traits were false, they acted just like Michelle's friend. The authors explain this with the Barnum Effect and previous knowledge of horoscopes.
And that's what this is all about. So the Barnum effect is essentially when people interpret very general or vague statements to have personal meaning.
Exactly. That vague phrasing lets the reader essentially fill in the blanks, which makes them think it's accurate. I think in a study where people who are more classified as like neurotic, or for a better word, like anxious, would be looking for validity and stability through such confirmation.
So how does all this tie back to the stuff we learned in Mind and Brain?
Remember when we talked about dopamine and reward prediction error and how it helps us with habitual decision making? So when we're identifying these patterns in horoscopes and seemingly correctly interpret them into our lives, we get a spike of dopamine.
Our brain likes these dopamine spikes, so it's incentivized to keep looking for those patterns, which is why people keep returning to horoscopes.
So to conclude, I feel like we can't deny that astrology is kind of fun. If my love life is in the pits, I'll definitely look for any stability, which is why I still read my horoscope. I don't know, maybe according to Michelle, I'm just a narcissist.
I completely agree with the narcissist part and the astrology. Can astrology predict my future? Probably not.
We just have to be aware of the cognitive neuroscience behind why it feels so accurate.
I used to love zodiac signs in middle school, and understanding the underlying cognitive biases and personality traits that lead to belief has made me more self-aware about my previous obsession.
Of course you would say that, Michelle. You're such a Virgo.
Love this episode? Follow, rate 5 stars, pun intended, and send us your craziest astrology stories. Did your horoscope ever tell you the truth? Or was it a disastrous fail? Subscribe, and the stars and your algorithm will align to your best interests. Thank you for listening.
Hello, it's the Chew Crew, and welcome to our episode, The Movement, Inside the Carnivore Diet Trend.
Today, we want to cover a topic that has been taking social media by storm, the carnivore diet, with people chomping on massive pieces of butter, consuming 100 ounces of steak for a meal, demolishing dozens of eggs a week, and acting like a little kid refusing their veggies during dinner.
Well, are these die-hard carnivore diet fans justified, or have they fallen victim to flashy trends? Are these people justified in saying that the carnivore diet is more beneficial than harmful because it helps with weight loss, reduces inflammation, and improves mental clarity?
Today, we'll be chewing out the effects of a carnivore diet and covering the science. Let's dig in.
Let's first discuss how participants in the diet feel about it from a personal perspective and from a health effects perspective.
Oh wow, how did the researchers go about measuring this?
In a study published by the journal Current Developments in Nutrition, researchers asked 2,029 people who partook in this diet about their experience, foods that they normally ate, satisfaction, health, as well as any lab reports that could be used to test for health effects.
And what did they find?
Researchers found that satisfaction for the carnivore diet was high amongst participants. There was a lack of adverse health effects, benefits for those with diabetes, such as less medication usage, as well as a weight loss for participants in general. Furthermore, for those who want more science-specific results, among those who reported laboratory data, researchers saw LDL cholesterol was elevated and HDL cholesterol and triglycerides were optimal.
Wow, it really seems like the carnivore diet promotes good health. Is this the case from a nutrient standpoint?
Well, in an article published in the Nutrients Journal, researchers analyzed whether the carnivore diet satisfied nutrient reference values set by the Australia and New Zealand health institutions. And in this study, there were 4 meal plans designed for men and women, with 2 containing dairy and the others containing offals, which are internal organs. The researchers found that the carnivore diet is great for meeting recommended daily intake levels for nutrients such as phosphorus, zinc, and the vitamins B6, B12, and A. But they also found that the meal plans were consistently deficient in thiamine, magnesium, calcium, vitamin C, and fiber.
Wait a minute, what does this mean for people who want to follow the carnivore diet then?
Well, even if people self-report feeling healthy on the diet, long-term nutrition deficiencies can cause health problems. So, these people should be aware that they have to carefully plan what they eat and potentially take supplements to meet nutrient requirements. This is not as simple as just eating red meat and eggs. I think the media has been oversimplifying the carnivore diet to the point of encouraging unhealthy eating. What do you think, Bolivia?
Well, according to the cardiologist Paul Bella, the carnivore diet has more risks than benefits when you're talking about the heart. It can lead to elevated LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, and that is a known risk factor for heart disease and stroke. Moreover, the lack of fiber makes it harder for the body to regulate blood pressure and overall cholesterol levels. Also, when plant-based foods are removed from the diet, the body is missing out on essential nutrients that can help protect against long-term disease. Furthermore, an article published in the International Journal of Food Sciences and Nutrition found that there was convincing evidence of the association between excess intake of total red and processed meat and increased risk of serious diseases and various types of cancer.
Wait, that's not good. And these are just regular people, right? What does the carnivore diet do for athletic performance?
Well, in a case study published in the Journal of Exercise and Nutrition, an 18-year-old female NCAA Division II athlete began the carnivore diet just 1 month prior to the start of her season. And as she was monitored, it was it was seen that she was unable to maintain the intensity of training until a dietitian recommended that she add a small amount of carbohydrates to her diet before and after games. These results suggested that the carnivore diet is not sustainable for athletic performance.
So what I'm hearing is, overall, the carnivore diet seems to be an overhyped fad diet that has far more drawbacks than the benefits influencers claim to experience.
Always be skeptical with what you find online. Of course, if you still want to follow the diet, now you're more informed of its effects.
This is our take on the carnivore diet. If you love this episode, join the Chew Crew or support us by subscribing to our Patreon.
Be the first to know about our newest episodes by subscribing to our podcast, Choose Wisely. Next week, we will explore the opposite extreme, the fruitarian diet.
As always, remember to choose wisely what you're eating. You can make this easy by buying our food service. Chew on this.
So, we've chewed through today's topic, digested the details, and savored the insights. Join us next time for another course.
Welcome to the Unveiling the Science Behind Keto Success. I'm Billy Quinn.
And I'm Julia Heaps. Today we're unpacking one of the most popular and misunderstood nutrition strategies of the past decade, the ketogenic diet.
It's low carb, high fat, and backed by both loud opinions and an increasing number of studies. So today we're going to be separating biological reality from, whatever your cousin Kevin said on Instagram.
So, scientifically, the ketogenic diet is designed to push your body into ketosis, a metabolic state where fat, not glucose, becomes your primary energy source. This shift occurs when carbohydrate intake drops low enough that the liver begins producing ketone bodies.
Right, and those ketone bodies, beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and their tiny chaotic friend acetone start fueling your cells. Multiple studies, including the 2022 Metabolic Syndrome and Related Disorders pilot trial, have explored how this metabolic reorientation affects cardiovascular markers and energy regulation.
Translation? Your metabolism stops relying on carbs and basically says, fine, we're running on fat now.
So let's tackle the big question. Why do people often lose weight so quickly on keto?
Well, first, the early drop is largely from glycogen depletion. Glycogen binds water, so reduced carbohydrates equals reduced stored water. But scientific reviews also point to changes in hunger hormones, insulin sensitivity, and in some individuals, increased fat oxidation.
So yes, the early weight loss is real, but the mechanisms are a mix of physiology, metabolism, and your body saying, I guess we're doing this now.
Of course, beyond the data, keto has no shortage of personal testimony. A lot of people report feeling more energetic, less hungry, and more in control of their eating habits.
Take Kay's transformation on Natural Force, for example. 40 pounds loss, lots of lifestyle change, and a cracking blog post.
But, as any scientist will tell you, anecdotes illustrate possibilities, not guarantees.
Time for some myth busting, academically, but also lovingly.
Myth number 1. Keto is a free pass to consume unlimited fat. This is false. The quality of dietary fat matters. Research often emphasizes unsaturated fats over processed ones.
Myth number 2. Keto has no risks. The 2023 U Chicago Medicine Review makes it clear. Some individuals see increased LDL cholesterol, nutrition deficiencies, or difficulty maintaining the diet long term.
Myth number 3. Carbs are evil. This is also scientifically false. Carbs are essential for many people's performance and well-being. Keto is a tool, not a moral stance on food. Don't villainize one specific food group.
That wraps up today's look at keto, from metabolic pathways to real-world outcomes.
All referenced studies and resources are listed in the show notes if you want to be a major nerd.
As always, thank you for listening, and please, consider donating to my son Gary's GoFundMe. He is apparently committed to keto, and financially speaking, he is breaking me.
Anyway, you can find us on Substack and Roblox at Cool Keto Kids 120, where we've somehow ended up with an Easter egg in Fat Loss Simulator.
See you next time. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and please, eat at least one green thing. Beep.
Hello and welcome to Urban Minds, the podcast where we explore how city life shapes our mental health. Today's big question is nature the cure we've been ignoring? Most of us would say that a stroll in the park has improved our mood, but what does the science actually show? I'm Marco from Hong Kong, and I'll be talking about a study done right here in New York City, where they've been looking at how green spaces relate to mental health emergency room visits. Joining me today are Reem, who has results from a major Australian tree canopy study, Ishan, who examined green space perception in Slovakia and Spain, and Andrew, who looked at young adults' emotional responses to parks in China. Hi everyone.
Hi, I'm Reem, originally from London, and excited to share the surprising differences between trees and grass in Australia.
Hello, I'm Ishan. I focused on how people feel about their local parks and how that connects to their mental well-being.
Hello everybody, I'm Andrew, and I'll explain how smells, scenery, and activities in Chinese parks shape emotional health.
Perfect. We've got New York, Australia, Europe, and China. Let's jump in. First, New York. The New York City study, Exposure to Urban Green Spaces, may both promote and harm mental health in socially vulnerable neighborhoods, found something very counterintuitive. In socially vulnerable neighborhoods, two different kinds of green exposure produced opposite effects. According to the results, visibility of greenery was associated with lower ER visits for mental disorder. But proximity to parks, being closer to public parks, playgrounds, or community green spaces, was associated with higher ER visit rates.
So, just to be clear, in socially vulnerable neighborhoods, living closer to parks actually increased mental health ER visits. Why on earth would a park increase acute mental health episodes?
Well, yes, only in high vulnerability neighborhoods. The study directly asks this question and gives an explanation. They know that parks in disadvantaged areas may be qualitatively different environments. The authors explain that green spaces in deprived neighborhoods often have higher rates of drug use and crime, which means these parks may actually introduce additional stressful or traumatic experiences, not reduce them. So the harm isn't nature itself, but it's the context. A park in an affluent neighborhood may be clean, safe, and restorative. A park in a highly stressed neighborhood may function as a site of instability, danger, or social disorder. That's why the paper says green space can promote or harm mental health depending on neighborhood conditions.
The study I reviewed followed 46,000 adults. They separated greenery into tree canopy, shrubs, and grass, and results were clear. Tree canopy lowered psychological stress by around 31%, when neighborhoods had at least 30% coverage. Grass-heavy areas were linked to a higher distress. Trees provide shade, biodiversity, and encourage walking. Grass alone offers none of those benefits. It's green, but not necessarily mentally restorative.
So trees are the heavy hitters, grass might not help much at all?
Exactly. The author said if you want to boost community mental health, plant trees, not just grass.
Right, let's move to Europe. Ishan?
In the study I analyzed, titled Perception of Green Spaces' Role in Enhancing Mental Health and Mental Well-Being in Small and Medium-Sized Cities, researchers surveyed residents in Nitra, Slovakia, and Cordoba, Spain. Big finding. Mental well-being depended more on how people perceived the quality of their parks than on how much green space existed. If people thought their parks were safe, attractive, and well-maintained, they reported significantly better well-being. Differences between cities mattered too. In Nitra, simply spending more time in parks had a strong mental health benefit. In Cordoba, extreme heat made parks less usable, reducing their impact. So again, context matters. Climate, culture, and design shape whether green space helps.
Right, last but not least, Andrew, tell us about China.
Of course, in the article I reviewed titled The Health Perception of Urban Green Spaces and Its Emotional Impact on Young Adults, an empirical study from 3 cities in China, scientists tested 426 young adults across 3 Chinese cities. Emotional well-being improved most in parks that activated the senses through things like beautiful scenery, pleasant natural smells, more facilities, benches, courts, and even paths. Activities mattered too. Socializing or exercising boosted positive emotions, while quiet resting reduced negative emotions like stress. Even walking to the park was linked with the best emotional outcomes.
So, across 4 studies, nature helps, but only when it's accessible, high quality, and matched to local needs.
As Columbia students, we feel that green spaces have played an essential role in enhancing our well-being. Examples can include walking in Central Park or simply sitting underneath a tree and doing homework. We also connected with the idea that it's important to make the effort to take a break from city life and connect with nature outdoors, as it's easy for the big city to get overwhelming.
So, is nature the cure we've been ignoring? Partly, yes. It's not magic, but when done right through city and planning authorities, it's one of the cheapest, most accessible mental health tools our cities have.
Here's what listeners can do. Purchase tickets to our Central Park Walkathon. Use code GREENERY for 15% off of tickets.
Or post a selfie of you in a green space on Instagram with the hashtag green spaces in urban places for a chance to win your own free plush toy.
Thank you everyone for this amazing conversation, and thank you to our listeners. Step outside today, breathe in the fresh air, and let nature work its quiet magic. Stay well, stay curious, and stay green.
Peace out.
Welcome back to the REM Room, the show where we explore sleep science, decision-making, and also our own poor life choices. Today's question, does sleep deprivation impair decision-making the same way alcohol does? We've got our team of experts here to help us figure out whether pulling an all-nighter is basically the budget version of being tipsy. Let's talk sleep, or the lack of it.
Well, in one 2006 study, 34 healthy people volunteered to stay awake for 49 straight hours. After that, their decision-making was noticeably impaired, more impulsive, more risk-taking. It's like their prefrontal cortex clocked out early.
Exactly. When executive function drops, people shift toward immediate rewards. It's why sleep-deprived brains think, yes, I should finish my proton lesson at 4 a.m., but forget basic tasks an hour later.
So it's not just being tired, the brain's actual decision-making hardware slows down.
Right. Your confidence stays the same, but accuracy definitely doesn't.
Today's episode is brought to you by sleep, the original performance-enhancing drug. Known benefits include improved cognitive clarity, safer driving behaviors, and the ability to remember everyday objects, such as your CUID. If symptoms of chronic exhaustion persist, consult your doctor to determine if sleep is right for you. Alright, let's talk alcohol. How does it impair decision-making?
Yeah, in a 2014 study comparing 30 recently detoxified alcohol-dependent individuals with 30 healthy individuals, researchers found that alcohol weakens inhibition and reduces working memory decision-making in both conditions of ambiguity and risk, along with measurements of working memory. People struggle to process consequences even at moderate intoxication.
And behaviorally, you see impulsivity, slower reasoning, and more risk-taking. Sound familiar? Because those same deficits show up in sleep-deprived individuals too.
So both states reduce your think before you act filter.
Based on controlled laboratory studies, including a 2000 paper in Occupational and Environmental Medicine by Williamson and Fayer, we know that moderate sleep deprivation of about 17 to 19 hours awake produces cognitive and motor impairments equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of roughly 0.05%. That's the point where coordination, attention, and reaction time starts to decline measurably.
Oh, that actually makes sense. It reminds me of the time I pulled an all-nighter before my math midterm thinking I'd gain extra study hours. By the morning, I couldn't even remember formulas I knew the night before. It felt really similar to when you've had one gin tonic too many and suddenly your brain is just buffering. So, hearing that around 18 hours awake can mimic a 0.05 blood alcohol concentration, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, and that overlap becomes extremely important in tasks like driving. At 0.05% body alcohol concentration, reaction time slow and risk evaluation becomes unreliable. In the Williamson and Fayer study, participants who had been awake for 17 to 19 hours performed just as poorly on vigilance and coordination tasks as they did at 0.05% body alcohol concentration. Whether those impairments come from alcohol or from staying awake too long, the outcome is similar. Your ability to process information and respond quickly is significantly reduced.
The mechanisms differ. Sleep deprivation alters cognitive control, while alcohol affects inhibitory pathways, but the outcomes are surprisingly comparable. Bottom line, your brain is not built to function well under either condition, and in some cases, sleep loss can be just as dangerous as alcohol intoxication.
So here's the big takeaway. Both sleep deprivation and alcohol significantly impair decision-making. They slow your reactions, weaken inhibition, and make risky choices seem like great ideas. Different causes, similar consequences. So if you wouldn't take your Fro-Psy final after 2 shots of vodka, maybe don't do it after pulling an all-nighter. Thanks for listening. Check out our links and see the notes for all the research we mentioned. See you next time, hopefully well-rested and making at least mostly good decisions.
Thank you for listening to the Columbia Frontiers of Science Student Podcast, and I hope today's episode helped you see how scientific thinking shapes the everyday questions we often overlook. In this series, we'll keep exploring real-world case studies, challenging claims, digging into data, and staying curious about the world around us. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to tune in the next episode and keep questioning with us. Until then, thanks for joining our Frontiers of Science journey.